Well, hello. Is there no one at all in the chat? Well, it says 0 here, but I think I should start because just by going live and talking, somebody will come along. Sorry, I'm reading my notifications while I wait for you to gather round me. Jen has very helpfully sent me an article from Aretz, which will be, I guess, the main topic of this stream. I guess she's perhaps lurking in the chat now. There's one person. Hi, Jen. Hello. Would you like to? Okay, I'll let you come on when I've finished looking at the Aretz article. Now, I have to think of what I wanted to say before Jen brought this lovely article to my attention. I suppose I would have just talked about American foreign policy, American domestic policy, geopolitics, and Jen has been very encouraging. On Week in Review, she played what I said to her in a private message on Hangouts, and she took the trouble of having it read by this electronic female voice with an English accent, and when I heard it, I thought, well, that was actually not bad. I managed to, when she asked, give an off the cuff commentary on, well, the next 100 years. I'm not guaranteeing that it's going to be right, but I think eventually what I say will happen for geopolitical reasons. We can't stop ourselves from behaving as we would, born as the people we are born with, from the family backgrounds, with our parents, with our tribe, community, society, nation, civilization. We can't help but be creatures of our time and place. We can change our life direction. We can, it is after all possible to change our sex, but not advisable, I might add. The low can rise and the highborn can fall. Fortunes. Well, people talked about a wheel of fortune. Shakespeare did. And they talk about it coming full circle. I guess at the end of the turn, we get our just reward, or something of that nature. Jen is obsessed about proving that I don't understand logic. So she keeps going on about contraposition, which is a mathematical perspective on logic. I deal in syllogisms and valid and sound arguments, which Jen doesn't understand at all. Jen has shared my private messages with people, but she seems to assume that I would respect her privacy because what? I have betrayed no confidence, so I'm confident that I am behaving honorably, but Jen isn't. But so what? Yes, Jay has showed up because he thinks he has a few lessons to teach me about debate. But then he talks amongst people who don't care about the arguments, and that is how he gets his attention. He can talk his bullshit. People will like it or hate it, and because he represents the common man, the common man who lacks self-confidence will gather behind him because Jay does, he has a bit of front, I would say. He can bullshit away, he can hold forth and talk shit, and people will like him or listen to him and cheer him on, and he does express a whole bunch of prejudices that would be shared by low education, low status people. So that's how he gets his popularity from. Anyway, Jen and Jay fight to reign supreme. Being respectively the archetype of Western man and Western woman. They're both important, of course, in the great scheme of Western civilization. It's a shame I can't be talking to people more elevated and influential, but I think we can see from the way things are going now that big business is not exactly influential. Richard Branson is hurting, P&O are hurting, lots of big shops that used to be household names are in administration. The government doesn't care, does it? It doesn't care about big business either. It only cares about going through the motions of appearing to care. So we don't want shit government like that. We want a government that governs in the national interest. And we won't get it until we restore the patriarchy, and we can only restore the patriarchy through the rule of law of theocracy. Jen posts, today Claire said she didn't want to confront the deep state. Actually, I didn't say that. She wants to ingratiate herself to the deep state. She wants to join the swamp. I only ingratiate myself with, I would have to ingratiate myself if I were to make that a practice of mine. I would have to ingratiate myself to the most powerful, to the supreme being, wouldn't I? That's what I'd have to do. So the most sensible thing is, I think a lot of you have worked out my modus operandi. I bump along at the bottom with you lot because I have to. No one else will talk to me. Not the mainstream alt-right, not the political establishment. But I have to talk to you to give a record of activity that people can refer to, that I never gave up. I kept active, I kept developing my ideas and honing my arguments. So I expect, I guess, the security services, I'm sure they're monitoring all of us. I don't mind them knowing what I say and what I think and why I think it. I think it's important for us to explain the basis of our beliefs. So, of course, I would go for the most powerful, influential people I can possibly get hold of in order for my ideas to be adopted. That would make sense, wouldn't it? And if I have to associate with the lowly and undereducated and mentally deficient and mentally ill, then this is the cross I have to bear. I hope I have borne it with good grace. Perhaps sometimes I get impatient with people who seem incapable of accepting truth, logic, and morality, but then that is really the problem. The problem of the West is that it's brought up entire generations who have never submitted to truth, logic, and morality, and that's why its politicians are corrupt. Now, David said something quite interesting in the most recent edition of Week in Review, and he was saying to... Now, who was he saying it to? Was it Vincent? Anyway, he pointed out that the reason why Gentiles are so obsessed about Jews is that they all come to the conclusion that Jews are in charge and Jews are responsible, and therefore they hate Jews. And that's true. And he was saying, he pointed out to Jen that this Abrahamic narrative was actually more predictive of events and explanatory of history than Jen's scientific theories. You really must go back and listen to it. But obviously the timestamps are on Voice of Reason because Jen has blocked me from commenting under her videos, and she has also hidden me in the chat because she's so afraid of the truth, logic, and morality that I represent. This is, of course, a great compliment to me. There is this Latin saying, now how does it go? Oderint dametuant. It means let them hate if they do not love. And Jen hates me, don't you, Jen, dear? Jen says, I'm nuts because I performed this invaluable service for which I've actually been thanked. People actually don't bother listening to Jen streams now until after I've timestamped it, right? Few of them do. People with jobs and have limited time will wait for me to timestamp these things because my timestamps are an analysis of what was said. You hate me, Jen. I know you do. I know you want to destroy me, and this is what you have now dedicated your life to? And Lauren says, you two are still going at this old shtick. Well, I'm afraid so. I mean, there's nothing more interesting going on apart from Jen and me. I haven't found any more rational or more educated or more influential YouTubers, have I, prepared to talk to me. It's only Jen. But I don't mind. So David was saying that Gentiles try to get away from Jews and reject Jewish ideas, but in the end, even in their hatred of Jews, they submit to them. Because by complaining about them, by claiming their victimhood and saying Jews did this to them or that to them, and they've always done it and will always do it, they are taking a position below them and say, we are such victims. Look at the Jews who are the liberal elite who oppress us and exploit us and abuse us and subvert us. Lauren, what are you trying to say about my ideas or persona? How would you describe my persona and my ideas? And so I've got the very thing for these anti-Semites, Islamophobes and racists, but they won't look at it. I go to the alt-right and say, look, this will solve your problems. But not only do they reject it out of hand, they actually refuse to discuss it, and they tell each other not to discuss it. That is the comedy of it all. They can't get away from my ideas because they have no better solution other than mine. So really, they are like this patient with a leg that has turned black to save their life, to avoid dying from septicemia. The leg has to go. Unfortunately, they are still in a state of neurotic suspension, saying, oh, my traditions, my way of life, my liberalism, my Christianity, but they've all rejected it anyway. That's why they're in this state of confusion and anger. And this is represented by Jay and Jen. They can't make up their minds. They want to come towards a flame, but they're having their wings burnt. But they still want to come. They still want to post in my chat. They still want to influence me and change my mind. And even Jen, who says, all I would like is for Claire to remove all references to me on her blog and never mention me again outside my ideas. Now this is quite comical, really. Jen expects me to only discuss her ideas, and she gets very angry when I say, you're only saying that because. And when you fill in the blank, as I often do, she'll accuse me of what she says what she calls ad homing her. So I might say, you only say this because you're pandering to your anti-Semitic, Islamophobic subscribers. And she'd get angry because, well, it's true and she can't convincingly deny it. Or you're only saying this because you're crazy, and she doesn't like that either. So I guess it's a love-hate relationship. Yeah, so on the one hand, Jen says, the timestamp on Claire's blogs is because she's nuts and stalks me and she really needs to leave me alone. Even the expression of this, I don't need to leave Jen alone. Jen is saying she wants me to leave her alone. And then the next thing she says is what she just said. All I would like is for Claire to remove all references to me on her blog and never mention me again outside of my ideas. She contradicts herself, like Jay does. And of course, this is a sign of neurotic suspension, as my friend Simon Shepherd has termed it. My feelings about Jen are paradoxical, really. I know she hates me. She hates me viscerally, in that she hates my guts. But I think in a strange way we complete each other in that we both offer a theocracy, so we are rivals in theocracy. I have already proven that mine must be better than hers, because it comes with a rule of law. Imagine if Jen and I were both selling you a piece of equipment. And I'm saying mine comes with a guarantee and an instruction manual. And Jen says, mine doesn't come with either a guarantee or an instruction manual. You'll have to trust me to come and repair it as and when. Me and the people I've trained. Who are the people she's trained? She hasn't got a single official follower because she cannot be taken seriously. Now, what is my instruction manual? I'm saying you can easily access it for free, online, globally. It is, of course, the Quran. And secular Quranism is a new school of Sharia. She knows she can't defeat me. I mean, if you were rational, you would trust. You would be. Well, you do need to be told that once you know what the rules are, you can decide whether you could live under it. Rather than say, oh, I like the smile of Jen better than I like Claire's smile. I'm going to choose Jen and trust her to be nice to me. Well, she's got a bit of track record for leadership, hasn't she? Jen isn't even interested in politics particularly. Lauren, you have to say, well, you're free to contradict anything I say and say, in the comments below, you can always come back to the stream and say, at this point in the stream, you say this, I disagree because, or it's not true because, or whatever. Nobody bothers because it doesn't seem that anybody can complete a thought in these circles. So you can see that Jen has a problem with me. But let me go back to the article that from Aretz that Jen so helpfully sent to me. And it's called Why Israel Will Never Be Governed by Jewish Religious Law. Aretz is the guardian of Israel, really. So you would expect these liberal Jews to want to live in a theocracy. They won't like secular Quranism at all. So the Jews who might like it would be religious Jews. Of course, they won't like secular Quranism because it's not their holy book. But it is a holy book that refers to the children of Israel who openly admits its debt to Judaism and Christianity, because Islam is a synthesis of Judaism and Christianity. I'll read it out to you. It begins, Israel will not be a halakhic state, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu promised Monday, and for a change he was right. This was written in June the 7th, 2019. By the time halakha came about, so that was the first paragraph, and I skipped the second paragraph, and it continues. Israel will not be governed by Jewish religious law, and in fact, no government has ever been ruled in accordance with halakha. Halakha is Jewish law. In the time of King David, not only was there no halakha yet, but the book of Deuteronomy had yet to be written. By the time halakha came about, with the completion of the Mishnah in the 2nd century, there was no longer an independent kingdom of Israel, and in the intervening period, the Hasmonean kingdom absorbed Hellenistic concepts. Aristobulus and Hyrcanus are not Hebrew names, and executed Jewish sages. Now, there's a whole bunch of history there, but I'll look up Mishnah for you. So, you know that the Jews have the Torah, the Tanakh, the Mishnah, the Gemara. I've forgotten what the Mishnah is now. Of course, the Talmud. So they have a whole bunch of books. So the Mishnah is the first major written collection of the Jewish oral traditions known as the Oral Torah. It is the first major work of rabbinic literature. The Mishnah was redacted by Judah the Prince at the beginning of the 3rd century, in a time when, according to the Talmud, the persecution of Jews and the passage of time raise a possibility that the details of the oral traditions of the Pharisees from the Second Temple period would be forgotten. So it's partly Talmud, apparently. Anyway, and then there's something called the Midrash. It gets a bit complicated, but I think we should understand that the Mishnah contains halakha more than any other Jewish holy book or commentary on them. So back to that article. So when he speaks about Israel, meaning Netanyahu, returning to operate as it did in King David's time, so who's saying that? MK Bezalel Smotrich is denying history. No wonder. Historical ignorance is a prerequisite for any fundamentalist vision. So this is, obviously the liberal Jews saying we will never live in a theocracy because we don't wanna. As with other examples of theocratic ambition, such as the Islamic Republic of Iran, the Islamic State organization, and the Hindu nation promoted by religious nationalists in India, the attempt to imagine a modern government based on religious law always necessitates the invention of a fictitious past and significant self-persuasion. With just a few tweaks and minor adjustments, the story goes, we could then copy and paste ideas and institutions from the distant past into our world. This never works, and not just because such efforts are based on mythology to begin with. It doesn't work because it completely ignores the radical changes that have taken place in the human condition. Not that there haven't been rabbis who have tried to sketch a vision of a modern halakhic state. In the 20th century, Rabbi Shaul Yisraeli addressed this. Rabbi Naftali Bar Ilan devoted 4 volumes to regime and state in Israel according to the Torah. Rabbi Elitza Yehuda Waldenberg wrote Hilkot Medina on halakhic issues on the modern state. Medina, that's interesting. Justice Menachem Alon wrote extensively on Hebrew law, and leading forward just last year, Rabbi Ido Rechnitz published a book called Medina Kehalakha, a Jewish approach to the challenges of independence. Still, no one has ever been able to come up with a framework that anyone but a handful of fanatics would consider realistic. And for this, Jay and I am extremely grateful. A whole bunch of names that I can ask my rabbis about. Now, why do they mention Medina in these? Why do these rabbis mention Medina? Well, the reference seems promising for my project anyway. Still, no one has ever been able to come up with a framework that anyone but a handful of fanatics would consider realistic. That's not a coincidence. The problem with halakha as it is today is not that its laws are bizarre or anachronistic. Yes, the punishment for theft is a fine amounting to twice the value of the stolen item, a ludicrous penalty that would permit people of means to steal to their heart's delight. Yes, halakha prohibits women from testifying or serving as judges, an insult to the intelligence of any rational human being. Such details can presumably be modified and updated. The real problem is a fundamental understanding of humanity in halakha. According to halakha, human beings must obey divine law and cannot legitimately choose to do otherwise. Simply put, halakha minimizes the significance of individual autonomy. The compulsion to observe the commandments is part of halakha, and it is also no coincidence that halakha permits both slavery and pedophilia. Well, I'll have to ask my rabbis about that. When there is no equivocal recognition of the individual as an autonomous subject, then enslavement becomes acceptable. And when choice and consent are not a necessary condition in sexual And when choice and consent are not a necessary condition for sexual relations, it is no wonder that it is permissible to have sex with somebody who cannot choose. And on the other hand, consensual sex between people of the same sex is prohibited. So on the permissibility of slavery and paedophilia, well, I know that neither the Bible nor the Quran forbid slavery. Now, paedophilia, I don't know what the references are. And obviously, consenting adults fornicating, having extramarital sex of one kind or another is not permissible. And basically, the position of Judaism and Islam is that, and also Christianity, is that only heterosexual couples can marry, and only married couples have the right to enjoy have a right to enjoy recreational sex with each other. So that's a religious position. And obviously you shouldn't force people into marriage, because that would really defeat the whole purpose of it, because the purpose of marriage is legitimate children. And if you believe in God, you would want to have legitimate children and not have illegitimate children, which be evidence of a sexual offense. And obviously, if marriage is a joint partnership between man and woman to bring up the next generation, then you need to stay together for the sake of the children, and it will be very hard to do that if you don't willingly do that. If you don't willingly enter into that contract, I mean. So, if it is indeed the case that marriage is a contract of mutual enslavement, well, why would you do that to someone you hate? Why would you become the slave of somebody you don't like or trust, or whose company you cannot bear? Because obviously the parties to the marriage have obligations to each other. The woman to look after the man and the children of the marriage, and the man to protect and provide for his wife and the mother of his children, as well as the children of the marriage. This is why marriage changes the legal status. I mean, it changes your will. I mean, okay, the assumption is that there are certain rules of inheritance. So if you die intestate, the law will distribute your property according to its rules, and you can only change its rules if you make a will and say, no, I don't want everything to go to whoever. That would, your parents, if you have any, and then if both your parents are dead, then your siblings, if you have no wife. But the law presumes that everything goes to your spouse if you die. If you don't make a will, of course, you can make a will and say, no, I don't want the missus to get everything. I want my parents, or, the cat's home, or whatever. So that is the most significant change in status that you undergo when you marry someone. So let us continue. For its time, the Hebrew law was an advanced, enlightened system, and Jewish tradition brought into the world many principles that ultimately contributed greatly to modern humanism and liberalism. Yet today, there is a fundamental tension between halakha and modern conceptions of humanity and liberty. Now, I interpret modern to mean feminist. So instead of worshipping God, the average Westerner worships the goodies that feminism has brought it. The sex and shopping culture, the idea that you can have consensual sex with anyone as long as they're adult. Well, clearly that is very political and has altered the stability, has increased instability, both economic and social, in the West. And this is what you're all complaining about. So when you run your society along egalitarian lines, and it is the idea of egalitarianism that brought in feminism. If you think of the whole thing logically, all these ideas come from the French Revolution. The slogan of the motto of the French Revolution is liberty, fraternity, and equality. And you think, oh, those just 3 words, but they mean important things. So after the French Revolution, the idea of liberty is valued for its own sake, even though most people are stupid and would only abuse their liberty anyway. So I would define liberty as what we ought to have after all the necessary laws are in place. And of course, what would be considered necessary is controversial. The next thing is equality. But it would be the greatest injustice to treat unequal things equally. Imagine God, if he exists, decided to treat all people equally, no matter what kind of life they led. So he could say, well, I can't be bothered to work out which of you is good or evil and what kind of lives you've led, but I'll just send you all to heaven or hell. Now that would be a great injustice, would it not? As for fraternity, you won't be able to summon up a universal brotherhood of man just by saying so. So really, what we have in the 3 main ideas of the French Revolution is the idea, is wish list politics. And this is what you've been operating under for the past few hundred years. It's time to admit that wish list politics is unsustainable. You can't just get something just by asking for it. And particularly when it's not practicable. So what we want is a hierarchical society, and this would kick out the idea of egalitarianism, because egalitarianism is the idea that all people are equal when they are not, and this causes conflict and makes it difficult for the government to govern us, because people will say, who are you to tell us what to do? You're no better than us, and shit like that. Obviously, you should be better than other people if you manage to get into a position of government, if you become leader of a nation. And you should be able to say, well, I am better than you because I at least have managed to find someone to marry me, and she is clearly loyal and supports me, and we have children of the marriage, and they are clearly good people, children and wife under control. And then, only then, might you have any authority as an alpha male over to lead the beta males. So this is how it should work in a properly ordered society. What about the women? Well, I think most women, when you ask them, they might not admit it to you, I suppose. They'll say, I don't want children, I never did. But the fact is, when you can no longer have children, you will want to have them. So when would be the best time to ask women if they wanted children? I think it would be between 35 to 40, when they know the time has come and gone, when their eggs have withered. I suppose after 40 they might, say, no, I never wanted children. But really they'll always wonder what life might have been if they had children. And of course marriage is the most important partnership that we can all hope to make. So let's continue. As a personal and communal commitment, a halakhic lifestyle can be deep and meaningful, but one cannot talk about a state operating in accordance with halakha without also talking about religious coercion. In fact, Waldenberg was an avowed supporter of theocracy, and Rechnitz's book also clearly demonstrates that there can be no freedom of religion in a halakhic state. Sorry, I'm just still dealing with my notifications. Actually, one needn't go so far as picturing some future halakhic dystopia in order to understand the Smotric's proposal is not a good bet. It is enough to look at what's already happening in the Israeli systems that are in the hands of the Orthodox establishment. The laws of marriage and divorce, over which the chief rabbinate holds a legal monopoly, have become a mechanism for coercion and injustice. Non-religious couples are compelled to marry not in keeping with their beliefs. Women are discriminated against under the marriage canopy, as well as the divorce laws, and the rabbinical courts abuse many who come before them. Even without the blatant corruption and nepotism that is so rampant in the rabbinate, it would still be despised by the public simply because the modern conscience repels against coercion and discrimination. Modern read feminist. Smotrich, whose decision plan published 2 years ago called for the Palestinians to either agree to live as subjects or to choose between emigration and death, has proved before that democratic principles are of no interest to him. It's no surprise to find him leading the theocratic charge. Hardalim, the ultra-Orthodox Zionists, account for just 2% of Israel's Jewish population, but intoxicated with the political power given to them by Netanyahu, they mistakenly believe the time has also come for their fundamentalist ideas. Placing them in the centers of decision-making will clearly lead to religious coercion and a shrinking of civil liberty. There is also a lot of room for democracy in Torah law, Smotrich hastened to reassure everyone following the uproar over his comments, touting the imminent return of the kingdom of the House of David. But this is not correct. There is room for Torah law and democracy, but not the reverse. The relationship is always one way because one conception is fundamentally tolerant and insists on individual rights and freedom of religion, while the other does not. Should Smotrich and company obtain the kind of power they desire, we will all be made quite aware of this. And this is written by somebody called Tomir Persico, who is a visiting assistant professor at the Berkeley Institute for Jewish Law and Israel Studies at University of California, Berkeley, and a research fellow at Jerusalem's Shalom Hartman Institute. Well, we know Berkeley. Well, we know these Californian universities are undeniably liberal. Now, what we're talking about here, really, the final paragraph in particular, is that they're saying, the secular Jews are saying, the minimum standard of morality should be lower than the Noahide standard of morality. Okay, this is what it's all about. So the argument in this article is that the religious can do what they want under the democratic system, the liberal democratic system, but the majority of Jews being liberal in Israel won't be able to do what they want if the religious lot are in charge. And the religious lot would say, well, we're Jews. We have to observe higher standards of morality than the Gentiles. Obviously, that's a real difference between Jew and Gentile. Jews have 613 commandments that they have to follow, and Gentiles only have 7. And that, for this reason, we think, we have to, show clear blue water between us and them. And they've also said, well, there are all kinds of Gentiles. Some of them are idolaters and blasphemers and atheists, and we want only to associate with the righteous Gentile, and the righteous Gentile would conform to the Noahide laws. Which is fair enough, it's a minimum standard of morality, and so really the argument now is which minimum standard of morality should be acceptable in Israel. I'm saying the Noahide laws because, of course, my whole idea is to say that secular Quranism, which is based on the Quran as is Islam, is most Noahide observant and obviously more Noahide observant than Christianity. So really, if I get rabbis to rank the 4 other world religions, they won't do it because they're scared, because they're cowards too. I predict that if they were being rational, they would definitely say, even if they say Islam is not Noahide observant, I'm saying that it is actually, it's more than Noahide observant because it bans usury. But it doesn't matter if they say, it is Noahide observant, or it's not Noahide observant, but it's closest to being Noahide observant. That's good enough for me, as long as Christianity falls below it. And I already know that Jewish authority says that only reluctantly in the late Middle Ages did rabbis say, well, perhaps Trinitarianism is okay for the Trinitarians. or some other, mealy-mouthed um, affirmation of the respectability of Christianity because, well, they didn't fancy being pogromed. They would rather stay in whichever Christian European country they happened to live in, and they wanted to do business with Christians. So that was what happened. They diluted their principles. But now, I don't think Christians are going to kick them out. I don't think there are many Christians in the West anyway, and I'm defining a Christian as somebody who's been confirmed, and I know hardly anyone has been confirmed. In fact, it's such a deep, dark secret that the Catholic Church won't even release the official numbers for Catholic confirmations. The COV keep records, but they are not impressive. I believe they're about 6 to 7 million, and they don't know if these people are still alive or dead. And that's why I say Christianity is that's why I say Christianity is kaput, and the West is as Christian as a human skeleton used to be human. Now back to the chat. So Jen thinks I'm obsessed with her. Well, I think I do have a certain focus on my most immediate rival. She is my rival in offering to supply you all with a theocracy. So being a political activist, I can hardly ignore her. I mean, just as, the Republicans and the Democrats have to be aware of each other's thoughts and deeds, so do the Tories and Labour in the UK, and so do I with Jen. I think, being the archetype of Western woman, which I have made her, she represents a certain demographic, and if Jen were to find herself becoming a secular Quranist, it would be, very useful for me, because, it would, I think, raise her status. She's afraid, of course, because it's uncharted territory. Why is Jen slightly more important than Jay in this regard? I mean, it's this. If Jay were to become a secular Quranist, it still wouldn't be quite so impressive as Jen becoming a secular Quranist, because basically, men will do anything for sex. They will risk their lives, invade countries, become soldiers in order to acquire territory and booty and women, or they will shut up, become women in order to secure their channels of sexual access. So in this way, they are actually, almost not worth talking to. So Jen, if she were to become a secular Quranist, it would receive widespread publicity. Obviously Jen would have to maybe have some kind of training. I think she sort of pretty much gets the idea of it. She just doesn't want to accept it. And then I think she will come to the notice of other white, middle-class, educated, college-educated women. And this is how I hope to raise the status of secular Quranism. There's something in it for Jen, really. I mean, but she would have to take the risk when taking the leap. She'll have to decide whether she wants to trust me and help me, and, in return, she will get the cult prestige that she so desperately wants. Because, think what would happen if Jen became a secular Quranist and managed to persuade a whole bunch of women that that is the way forward. And most Western women finally came round to the view that they would do better in a patriarchy, because the bargain that they would get is that there would be more marriageable men for them to marry. Because the problem of gender relations between Western men and Western women is that they hate each other. The thought of making them marry each other and stay together for the sake of the children gives them the heebie-jeebies. Their contempt for each other is undisguised, and their distrust, well, unspeakable, really. So some of us will, probably have to go to our graves childless, but those of us who find ourselves in that situation could make the best of things and say, well, you don't have to have children or be married to acknowledge that that would be the choice of most people, to think that they can find somebody to marry them and have children with them and look after the children and pay for the children. That's what we would like, ideally. Some of us have missed the boat, but we can still acknowledge that truth. And so do the confirmed bachelors. They can, most of them are, damaged people who've never met their fathers, so they can't, they will, people with daddy issues will find it difficult to believe in God. It was E. Michael Jones who told me that. So you're, victims of your, bad parenting, your lack of employment opportunities because you went to shit schools, or you didn't pay attention even if you went to a good school because you were badly parented and, missed all your educational opportunities, right? Too much sex and drugs and rock and roll, and now you've missed out. And that's why you're bumping along in the alt-right. So, Lauren, of course I have to talk about Jews, because Muslims are just as obsessed with Jews as everyone else. Levels of anti-Semitism is pretty bad amongst Muslims. And now why not just admit that you're all obsessed with Jews instead of getting all huffy and puffy when I point this out? Church of Entropy says, because Islam is a Jewish religion. Well, okay, Islam is. I'll try and go along with you on that and say Islam is based on Judaism. Without Judaism, there would be no Christianity, and without Christianity, there would be no Islam. So that is the whole story. Islam is a synthesis of the thesis of Judaism and the antithesis of Christianity. The Jews don't follow their own laws, but then neither do Christians and Muslims, and I'm just here to remind them that if they all follow their own rules and are prepared to discuss them with me, then their problems will soon be solved. Lauren has a few difficult questions to ask me. I would like him to ask me those questions on Ask FM. I actually want you all to go there, and if you have any questions, then ask them. Ask me your questions at Ask FM. Is that okay? It will be easier for me to explain my ideas to you individually. Streams are very time consuming after all. Okay, now I have to go right back up again. I don't mind you subscribing to the Domingo Chronicles. I have been time-stamping them and posting them, embedding them in my blog posts. Now, Cassandra O'Hara, what are you trying to say to me? She says, Claire, you're stuck in a temporal loop, which is one reason why you have no mental flexibility to accept cogent arguments. Now, what cogent arguments have you made? Kindly make them later in the comments under the video. I doubt you will, though. Now, Jen says, you should ask rabbis why Jews have never once enforced their laws. Now, which laws are you referring to? In the diaspora, they can't stone each other for breaking the Sabbath, though they can exclude each other from their minyan and their synagogue and their community. Now, I can't send you the link because actually I have to answer a call. So Jen says, every single Quranic government has been secular Quranism. This is not true because secular Quranism is a new school of Sharia and it's never been tried. Obviously, I'm saying that my interpretation is going to be better than all previous interpretations. And I would like this considered and discussed in academic and legal and political circles. Not, by you lot who can't string a coherent sentence together. Well, I don't know. You seem to be, Jen says, Claire thinks I can be bought off with status. Well, you seem to be particularly money obsessed, so status should be bringing you some form of income if you're prepared to fall in line. Okay, the next interesting question is Jen saying, I don't think Islam has much to do with Christianity. Well, if you read the Quran, Jen, as I've been urging you to do since we first met, you would know that there's an entire chapter devoted to Mary. I know why you all hate Ask FM, because you don't get a chance to talk and nobody listens to you and you don't think anybody's reading and therefore you don't care. But Ask FM is a very good way of slowing right down so you can talk about what the words actually mean. And Jen isn't really interested in that because she wants to bullshit you in the same way that Jay wants to bullshit you. While I'm more interested in investigating the truth and deconstructing faulty forms of reasoning. Yes, Jen, there is an entire chapter in the Quran devoted to Mary, Mother of Christ. All right, I've been talking for over an hour. I have to return this call. Thank you all for coming by. Thank you, Jen, for that article and containing those lists of names and titles of why Israel should be a theocracy. That's actually more than I expected. And of course, if you want the Abrahamic view, if you subscribe to the Abrahamic God, then you have to subscribe to the Abrahamic narrative. And the narrative must surely be that Jews living in Israel should live under a theocracy. Because these people, if they want to claim to be God's chosen people, then they have to answer the question as to what they were chosen for. And they can only be chosen to promote the Noahide laws. And if they're not doing it, then anti-Semitism will rise and God will punish them. It really is as simple as that. And this is so much easier to understand than Jen's convoluted streams about science. I know she loves to show off, but what I say is so easily understood, absorbed, remembered, and repeated. Duvid gets it. Yeah, go to Voice of Reason, and you'll find the time-stamped bits of week in review when Duvid says what he says, which is most perceptive of him. Thank you all for your attention.